Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our town hall tonight. Before we begin, I just want to note that we do have Spanish language translation here. You can select the language you'd like to hear tonight's town hall in by going to the translation tab at the bottom of the Zoom and selecting either English or Spanish. I recommend that even if you are listening in English, that you select English. Thank you so much. Okay. Well, again, welcome. I am Brianne Nadeau. I'm the Ward 1 council member, and I'm really pleased to be with everybody tonight. This has been a really, really challenging time for DC, for all of us, and I wanted to hold some space for our community. Even though we're on a webinar, there are almost 250 of us here right now together. I look forward to talking about some of the key issues that we're dealing with and how folks can get involved and also how we can keep each other safe. So thank you for joining. I would venture to say that this has probably been one of the worst weeks for home rule in our history. It's an assault on DC's autonomy with the attempt to take control of MPD, force DC agencies to participate in activities not permitted under DC law. Like you, I'm angry at the lies and the misrepresentations about the district, and I'm disheartened by the impact the federal actions have on immigrants, unhoused neighbors, and on daily life for all of us in this city. Over the past 8 days, just to recap, because it's been a long 8 days and sometimes it feels like a year, the president announced he was sending National Guard and that he would be taking over MPD. Federal law enforcement inserted themselves into MPD traffic safety stops and other strictly local police matters like responding to robberies. They used routine traffic stops to conduct immigration enforcement action. And at the end of last week, the administration issued an order saying they were in charge of MPD and they were taking command and control away from our own police chief. Now, the week didn't end like that. We did have an important victory for home rule and our residents on Friday when the court upheld the district's right to operate its own police force. The legal phrase is to have command and control over the police force. Our elected attorney general, our independent attorney general, filed that lawsuit and fought a great fight for the people here, and had the full support of the council and the mayor. And by the end of the day, Friday, it was agreed and understood that Chief Pamela Smith is still in charge of the police force under the direction of Mayor Muriel Bowser. There are still unresolved legal issues, so the Attorney General and his team may be back in court this week to clarify what federal law enforcement can and can't do regarding the clearing of homeless encampments and immigration enforcement, and critically, what they can demand of MPD and other district employees in that process. So these are very important nuances. There's a real danger. MPD officers could be directed to participate in activities that go against district law, with, most notably with regard to immigration enforcement. But we also saw last week efforts to do that with homeless encampments as well. We've received reports of immigration enforcement agents consistently present in Ward 1 over the past week. And I thank all of you who have been showing up, who've been letting us know, who've been videotaping, who've been asking questions, who've been demanding warrants and holding those federal law enforcement officers accountable. I am angry and deeply concerned for our immigrant neighbors about this activity, and we're closely monitoring the situation. I know with school starting next week, people are also worried about what's going to happen when kids are going back to school. There's fear about traveling to and from school. Earlier this year, the Attorney General gave guidance to DCPS about, and our charters about ICE needing warrants to come on the property and to engage with anybody on the property. And we're just working to clarify now that that still holds. But also there's been some really beautiful engagement at the PTO level and at the school community level, helping transport children to school safely if parents are afraid to go out or if they're afraid for their children to go out. And I know that because Ward 1 is that kind of place where we're all looking out for each other, that there will be more of that. And talking with both the deputy mayor and our state board rep, Ben Williams, about this and how we can work together within the Ward 1 Education Network. Tonight, I know both Ben Williams and Commissioner Christine Miller are here tonight listening in and working on these issues too. So on my website, we've compiled resources specific to immigrants' rights, and I encourage you to share those with your neighbors. I'm going to have my colleagues put those into the chat tonight so you can open that up and share that with whoever you think needs it. And we'll also talk about some of those tonight in the section later where we talk about our rights. So, I've heard from many of you over the past 8 days and really beyond, and thank you for the support of what we're trying to do here in government, which is stand up for all of you in any way we can. And all of us at the council appreciate your support, and we share the concern and we share the outrage, and also appreciate all that you are doing in community, because not a day goes by that we don't hear about community members standing up, because of course it won't only be our government that solves this. So thank you for that. And I appreciate it. I'm going to pause here too, and just because we've got some more people joining, and just ask our interpreters to repeat the instructions for translation real quick. Thank you so much. Now, I've also heard from folks who've said, of course, the federal actions concern you, but also crime that happens in our city is very upsetting. And I hear you, and I want to be clear that I will not be satisfied with any amount of crime in the district. Look, we've talked about this all week. The data shows that the numbers are going down significantly and consistently, but that is not what matters most when there's crime in your neighborhood, or when you've been a victim of crime, or when crime affects the people that you know and love. So we're going to keep doing everything we can to address crime across the city and in Ward 1. But the key here is that the federal intervention is not helping, and it won't help. It undermines our autonomy. It interrupts the chain of command. It brings in people who are not trained for community law enforcement. It frightens residents, and it sows chaos that has already resulted in unnecessary escalations. There are things the federal government could do to help. We talk about these a lot. Most notably, fill the 17 judge vacancies and the many prosecutor vacancies that have resulted in much slower prosecution and make it harder to hold bad actors accountable. The people of the District of Columbia, you are strong and resilient, and we know how to come together when times are tough. And as I said earlier, in the past week, we've seen so many people coming together and helping our neighbors. Okay, so we're working hard to keep this webinar to 1 hour. I'm going to go quickly to our agenda, and then we'll do questions. Our first guest speaker starts at 7:30, so I'm gonna wrap up my part in by about 7:20. We'll take some questions and then we'll go to her. So I'm going to talk about home rule in our legal situation, public safety, immigration, knowing your rights and what you can do, and then Q&A. And like I said, Q&A might be throughout. You can submit questions at any time during the webinar. Just tap on the Q&A icon at the bottom and we'll receive them and answer as many as we can during our time. I will be reading them out loud. I'm not going to get to all of them, undoubtedly. There are hundreds of you on this call. We're also going to be joined by Sam Davis from the Free DC Project and Emily Cassometus, who is an attorney with expertise in civil rights. And I want to thank all the ANCs who've joined us tonight. I can't name you all because I'm not looking at the participants list, but you know who you are, and I'm really pleased that you're here. And I thank you always for your partnership. We make a great team. So, okay. So starting off by understanding home rule, this will be a refresher for most of you, so I'm not going to dwell on it a lot. But in 1973, Congress approved the DC Home Rule Act, which allowed DC residents to elect the mayor, council members, and ANCs. And before that, DC was ruled by a federally appointed body of commissioners. And then the law also passed in large part thanks to the civil rights movement and the growing political power of Black residents. How does it work now? Our local government has the power to pass and enforce local laws and to pass our budget, just like any state. But because DC is considered a federal district, not a state, Congress and the president have the legal ability to micromanage local laws and local tax dollars, as we're seeing in real time. A number of bills that I've passed over the years have been targets of Congress. Ballot initiatives that voters have passed have been targets of Congress. And public health programs and all kinds of things that we know best for our community, that Congress just continues to attack. And they can also attach rules to the federal budget that require us to do or not do certain things. That would be these, a latest example of that would be, in 2014, the voters passed the legalization of marijuana, but since that time, there has been a rider on the budget every year that prevents us from using local dollars to implement that law, which we work around and we have, but it's not ideal and it's not what the voters envisioned. And finally, the president can exert authority over our police department, though not exactly take it over, as was asserted last week. He can direct MPD to assist with federal duties. Okay, so a big question that comes up a lot these days is what would it take to end home rule? The president cannot repeal the Home Rule Act on his own, but Congress can. It would be legislation. It would pass both the House and Senate and then signed by the president. That's how it would take place. And in February, 2 Republican members of Congress introduced legislation to repeal home rule. The president has indicated his support of that, but no action has been taken in Congress to move the bill forward so far. What happened last week was the president invoked an executive order, which is Section 740 of the Home Rule Act, to take, quote, full operational control over MPD, deployed hundreds of federal law enforcement officers across DC, and called into the city 800 members of the DC National Guard, allegedly under the guise of crime due to emergency. No president has ever invoked Section 740 of the Home Rule Act before this week. And as we saw, then the Attorney General issued an executive order to appoint a federal official as the emergency police commissioner, and suspended 2 MPD regs that would allow the administration to dictate what MPD does and how they do it, ordered MPD and federal agents to crack down on clearing homeless encampments and aggressively clear public spaces by physically removing and arresting unhoused residents. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we went to court Friday. The Attorney General prevailed and confirmed that president does not have the power to fully take over MPD. So that was our victory for home rule this week. Next slide, please. All right, so just on public safety, a few things to keep in mind: that this Trump action was never about public safety. Crime is being used as an excuse by the president to assert federal control, and we are nothing but a test case for other cities across the country. They're looking to see what they can get away with as far as military presence, police force, trying to change the way we operate. No amount of crime is okay, as I said earlier. And this year, especially, we've worked incredibly hard and been united in our effort to address crime, consistently bringing those stats down onto the decline. We recently passed Secure DC Omnibus Amendment Act, the Peace DC Omnibus Act, and over the last 2 years, we've seen a 52% drop in violent crime. It's the lowest crime rate we've had in 30 years. And over the years, I've also introduced bills to help with recruitment at MPD and to increase witness and victim participation to solve homicides. What the feds are doing is not helping with crime. And I mentioned earlier some of the things they could do to help, but fill those judicial vacancies, stop withholding $1 billion in federal grants to DC for victims of crime, and work with us, not over us or through us. Okay, next slide. And I have to move quickly here. Okay, so there's an unprecedented intensity of mass deportations and removals in our community right now, harming the lives of immigrants in DC. We are constantly concerned about the DC Sanctuary Values Act being under threat, but it is still the law in the District of Columbia. We do not have the ability to stop ICE from doing what they do, but it is not MPD's job to assist. And that is still the case here in the District of Columbia. I want to thank everyone who has let me know when you have seen ICE out. I've been really trying to go when you tell me where they are to try to assist. They move very quickly. And it is really important that everyone who is around knows what to do when they see them to assist as well. And we will get into that in a little while. But the shortest version of that is everyone should be asking to see a judicial warrant before they are willing to go with ICE. And you as a bystander can ask to see that warrant too. And you can videotape and you can ask questions and you can ask for the names of the officers and you can ask for the names of the people who are being taken so that we can all assist further after the fact. Now, with our unhoused neighbors, law enforcement began clearing encampments on Thursday night and swept through at least 3 encampments on Friday morning. I went out to assist our homeless services workers were out all morning Thursday getting people packed up and helping get them into shelter. This is something I worked incredibly hard on when I was the chair of the Committee on Human Services. And what we know is that unfortunately, this type of thing where we are sweeping rather than assisting can really undermine the work we do to build that trust to bring people inside. And temporary shelter beds are not the solution. The permanent housing is and that's what I've focused on so hard over the years, is to put more of that funding in the budget to get everybody matched up with housing. We are making a lot of progress on this. And the federal interference, unfortunately, sets us back and harms the work that we're doing, but more importantly, harms the people who are living outside. The solution to homelessness is housing, and it is not a crime to be unhoused. Okay, next slide. Okay, so we are going to move into questions in just a minute, but thank you everybody for all that you've been doing. When you think about what we can be doing together, keep exercising your First Amendment rights, being outside, demanding accountability, calling out the overreach and the tyranny, and join up with some of the organizations who are working so hard in our community, whether that's Free DC, who we're going to hear from in a little while, the Migrant Solidarity Network, Mutual Aid, the Way Home campaign. Please call Congress, especially Democratic senators, because there's also legislation pending that we talked about around home rule, but there is legislation that could help us with this 30-day crime emergency as well, that Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton and Jamie Raskin have introduced that would shorten that emergency once they get back from their recess. Okay, so just double checking that Sam has not arrived yet, so then we'll go to questions for a couple minutes until she gets here. And hopefully somebody will tell me when she does, because I'm going to be so engrossed in these questions. Okay. Let's see. All right. So far. All right. What do we know so far about where the unhoused people whose tents were destroyed last week ended up? And it's further says down near the George Washington Hospital in another ward, signs were up that clearing encampments would begin this week, but then tents were destroyed on Friday last week, not following DC's notice requirements. Yep, that's true. Also, tents were taken without being checked first to see what or who was inside of them, like pets. Okay, I'll answer this and then we're going to go to Sam. So you're 100% right. And we have very specific protocols here in the District of Columbia. We help people pack up their belongings. We provide storage when we can. And actually, in this case, we had a number of churches who offered to provide additional storage. We check tents multiple times to make sure there's no living beings inside of them. And only after we've ensured that everybody's belongings and pets and loved ones are accounted for do we take down those tents. And while that was what was happening on Thursday when DC led the cleanup near the U.S. Institute of Peace, my understanding from colleagues who had the opportunity to be there overnight Thursday and into the morning Friday was that protocol was not followed by National Park Service, and that's against our law. So we have asked the mayor to do an inquiry, an investigation into what occurred there and whether any DC officials or staff were part of that clearing and how that happened. This is part of the chaos that the federal intervention is bringing. So we're working with DC agencies and community organizations to relocate everybody. As we do that, those folks do know where the people are that have come into shelter because we flexed up to 100 more beds for this period of time. What we don't know anytime a clearing happens is where people go if they don't take shelter. They may go to another encampment. I know colleagues in neighboring jurisdictions also have been helping to place people in Maryland and Virginia. But what we want is to keep people here and keep people close to services in our community. And unfortunately, when the feds interfere in our protocol, we cannot always keep track of people. Okay, so I am going to take some more questions later. And then, but for now, I'm going to turn to Sam Davis. Samantha, thank you for joining us and really want to hear, so excited to have you here. Free DC is doing some incredible work across the city. And I know people want to know how they can help and how they can get involved in what's going on. And so I thought having you join for a few minutes tonight would allow us to hear more about that work and share with people how they can join up. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for creating this space. Hey, y'all, I am Sam or Samantha. I use she, they pronouns, and I am an organizer with Free DC. Free DC is a 4-year campaign aimed at protecting home rule and creating and supporting the dignity for all DC residents. You can go to the next slide. We are aiming to build a base of 24,000 DC residents supporting the efforts to protect and fight back against any attack that we are seeing on home rule. And we've seen a number, Councilmember Nadeau ran through a list, but we've been seeing a number of those different types of attack, from our budget to our legislation to now attempts to federalize DC. Next slide. Next slide. We already talked a little bit about home rule, and you can keep going. But what I want to just make sure we're stressing is that home rule was a negotiation. It was a compromise, and it creates this space where we are able to govern ourselves by electing our own local elected officials. However, we do not have final say over our budget and over any piece of legislation that is passed here. And that is what has allowed a lot of the things we've been seeing, a lot of the interference throughout our history, and both the Congress as well as the federal administration be able to impact the residents of DC so much. We can go to the next slide. Just to acknowledge Free DC is not a new movement, and it's not a hashtag. It is very catchy, but it actually was a campaign started by Marion Barry and members of SNCC back in 1966, at the time when we were not governing ourselves, and the federal government, the federal administration had full say over what was happening in DC. That grew and expanded with hundreds of thousands of DC residents working towards statehood, including Anise Jenkins and Eleanor Holmes Norton, what landed to Hands Off DC, where we saw Congress interfere with our criminal code in 2023. And now we're at Free DC. You can go to the next slide. Next slide. So I'm moving pretty fastly because Councilmember Nadeau already covered all of these things. Just to name that what we're up against is both how Congress is interfering in DC governance and everyday lives, as well as how the federal administration is interfering. And so this is just a list of number of ways that Congress could interfere. And I like to acknowledge that when we first started doing this work in January and February, a lot of these things were just potential, and now a lot of these things have been attempted. We can go to the next slide. And the executive action as well. So these are actions directly from our president. And we have seen mostly all of these, if not all of these, already occur. Next slide. So where we are and with Free DC is acknowledging, and we can keep clicking through these, acknowledging that there's a spectrum from a democracy to an autocracy. And while I will argue that the United States was never a full democracy or a true democracy in the first place because of the ways we exploit marginalized, particularly Black and Brown communities, we are definitely heading towards and closer to autocracy. How do we know that? If you look at the slide, each and every one of these aspects, the Trump administration has tried to or are actively doing, from directing investigations against critics, giving license to lawbreaking, January 6th, regulatory retaliation. Now we see the deployment of military domestically, federal law enforcement overreach. We can think about ICE, and then statements indicating that he has no intention of leaving or stepping down. We can go to the next slide. A lot of what, and you can keep clicking through, a lot of what the Trump administration is doing and what we see when people talk about authoritarianism or fascism is this reliance of fear and chaos, hoping that his threats will make people act and advance, and then really targeting our most marginalized people. And so trying to weaponize this tool of divisiveness. Next slide. And so with Free DC, we are looking for our residents, but particularly our local elected officials, to not obey in advance, to think creatively and be vigilant in how we're pushing back against the administration. We are prioritizing joy, so we have a number of events and activities happening all throughout the city where we can just honor our humanity, taking up space, making noise. At 8 p.m., from 8 p.m. to 8:05 every night, we are calling on all DC residents and allies to be stepping outside, gathering in the community, and making noise, shouting Free DC, banging on pots, what have you. Practicing solidarity. So we're doing some neighborhood strolls. We're starting to target some public transits to make sure that our young people are safe. Showing up at encampments to make sure unhoused folk are safe. Focusing particularly on the Ward 1 team, focusing on ICE and where they're showing up and how we're supporting our families there. And then organizing against that 24,000 residents that we're looking to be able to build in this space and move actively towards protecting against home rule. Can you go to the next slide? This is just a screenshot. Feel free to take a picture. All of this work that we're doing in terms of our strategies, in terms of why the 24,000, which is 3.5% of our residency. Take a screenshot and you can read up on some of the research backing this approach as well. We are organized in ward teams. So there is a Ward 1 team. One of the co-chairs of that team is on the webinar today, Ahmad. And there are a number of ward members, your neighbors who are already a part of this, holding community events, showing up for each other, having monthly meetings. The next monthly meeting is September 7th from 3 to 5 p.m. And there are other ways to get involved as well, with working groups, art builds, tabling, etc. You can go to the next slide. And so here are the different things we are looking for people to do. Again, we want Free DC to be visible everywhere. Talk about it with your neighbors. Push your local elected officials, even Councilmember Nadeau, on how she and her colleagues can continue, or even more so, be loud about and standing up against the Trump administration, standing up against the tactics of policing and criminalizing the most marginalized communities. Make signs, make posters, make banners and flags, hang them anywhere and everywhere you can. You can get Free DC t-shirts and hats and wear those everywhere where you go. And then we're looking for people again at 8 o'clock to 8:05 to go outside, and make noise in that way as well. There is a youth team as well if you're interested in supporting young people. I can drop that link in a bit, or we can send it out to you all after this call of how we're protecting young people. School is about to start next week. As my young person is avoiding bedtime, school is about to start next week. And so really looking to mobilize our neighbors on supporting young people. We're seeing these attacks on unhoused and migrant communities as well. And so there are ways through Free DC that you can tap in to support those neighbors as well. Next slide. And we're saying courage is contagious. We know that this is a very fearful time, a time of uncertainty. And just you showing up to these spaces, you making that noise, you leading with bravery will allow someone else to feel empowered to do that. So invite you into the Free DC space. I will drop the contact information for Ward 1's co-leads, and I know I'm probably over my time. So any other information that we want to pass along, we will do so either post the call or in the chat. And I'll also be here for questions as well, I believe.
We'd appreciate it if you can. Thank you so much. I know you're juggling a lot.
That's
So-
okay. Thank you.
So happy to have you. And our next guest speaker is Emily Cassometus, who is Assistant Professor of Law and Director of the Legislation Clinic at UDC School of Law, and did work here with us at the council before then. She has a wealth of knowledge and has presented before on knowing your civil rights, and we are very glad that she is here with us tonight. So take it away, Emily.
Thank you, Councilmember Nadeau, and good evening, everybody. Again, my name is Emily Cassometus. I am use she, her pronouns. I live in Ward 5, but I'm happy to be in front of you tonight and to share a little bit of information about your rights when encountering law enforcement. I do need to preface this by saying that this is not legal advice. This is for educational purposes only. So please, if you need advice for a specific situation, reach out to an attorney. I know that there are attorneys at ACLU-DC, at the Washington, at the Lawyers Committee, and at Legal Aid DC that are looking into law enforcement situations. And so those are some places you can call if you need specific advice. Slide, please. All right, I'm going to do my best to answer 3 questions for you. First is, what if law enforcement knocks on my door? Second, what if law enforcement stops me in a public area? And third, what if it looks like someone else needs help? Slide, please. So what if law enforcement knocks on my door? We've touched on this a bit already, but the first thing you need to do is ask them, do you have a warrant? And if they don't have a warrant, you do not have to open the door. You do not have to let anyone in. If they say that they do have a warrant, you should ask them to slide it under the door and check the details on the warrant. It should be specific to your address, to either the things or the people that the warrant is for, and it should be signed by a judge. So those are important details to remember. If the warrant is valid, you do have to open your door or they will let themselves in. Next slide, please. Okay. So second, what if law enforcement stops me in a public area? There are 5 key phrases that we teach to help people preserve their rights when they are in a situation with law enforcement. And I just want to make clear that these phrases are not magic. They can't stop law enforcement from doing something in the moment, whether it's legal or not, but it does preserve your rights and can help find accountability on the other side. Slide, please. First question that you need to know is, am I free to go? If you are stopped in a car, on a bus, on the sidewalk, you ask the officer, am I free to go? If they say yes, leave. Don't stick around to ask more questions, just leave. Leave calmly, but please leave. If they say no, that you're not free to go, that means that you're being what we call stopped under law. And at that point, you have to remain with the police officer. Next slide, please. If you have been stopped, there are certain situations in which officers can search you. We won't get into the details right now. The thing that you need to know is that regardless of the situation, you should be saying that you do not consent to a search. So that is the second phrase, I do not consent to a search, and make that clear no matter what the circumstances are. Slide, please. The third phrase is, am I under arrest? At this point, you've been stopped, you've been searched. The next stage is, are they going to take you into custody? And so if you are under arrest, they will physically handcuff you and take you into custody. If you are not under arrest, you need to revert to that very first question, say, then am I free to go? And again, leave as quickly as possible. Next slide. Our fourth phrase is, I want to speak to a lawyer now. I will not get into the vagaries of case law that make this specific phrase so important, but know that people will wheedle out of this however they can, and you need to be very specific. I want to speak to a lawyer now. If you are arrested, tell them you want to speak to your lawyer. And then the next slide, please. The last most important thing here is, I wish to remain silent. That's the fifth phrase. And after you say you wish to remain silent, you must actually remain silent. You cannot talk to anyone about anything, or they will use that as an excuse to ask you questions. So please, 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 once you ask for your lawyer and you tell them you wish to remain silent, do not say anything else to law enforcement until you have your lawyer present. Slide, please. Okay, so what if it looks like someone needs help? The first thing you should do is figure out, can you communicate with them? Are they conscious? Do they speak the same language you do? And if you can communicate with them, you should communicate with them. So ask them, do you need medical treatment? Would you like me to call someone? Is there something I can do to help? Do you want me to call the shelter hotline, right? Like, we want to ask people what they actually want when they are in crisis. Slide, please. If law enforcement is already present, then there are a couple of things that you can do to help, again, preserve the information and the rights in the situation. So if law enforcement is already present, we want you filming. Everybody has a right to film. They cannot stop you legally from filming. They can make you stand a safe distance away so that you're not interfering. So that's the second thing we need you to do, is make sure that you are, on the other side of the road, or back on the sidewalk, or significantly far enough away that you're not intruding physically on the space of what's happening, for your safety and for everyone else's too. The third thing you can do is ask questions. So if you're recording, you want to ask as many questions as you can and get as many answers as you can. So you can ask the person who is being stopped by police what their name is, if they'd like you to send the footage to anyone, what their email address is, right? You should also be asking the officers what agency do you work for? What's your badge number? What's your name? What are you arresting this person for? They may or may not answer your questions, but asking them and having some record of that is really important. Next, please. Finally, you should be sharing the video and the other information. So if you've done this, you've been the bystander, you've recorded, we really want to make sure that you are sharing the information first with the person if you were able to get their contact information. And then next slide, please. There are two organizations doing a lot of rapid response work right now. So the first is MISMA, the Migrant Solidarity Mutual Aid Network, and they have a hotline where you can send tips and videos. So the phone number is there. They have a massive call volume right now. So we're asking everyone, if you just have a ICE sighting, shoot them a text. If there's an active enforcement situation, go ahead and call. And they'll give you instructions. For other law enforcement agencies that aren't immigration related, the DC Safety Squad is taking footage and is responding in those situations, and they can be reached at the email on the screen. The last thing I want to say is that it's really, really important in all of these situations that you de-escalate as much as possible. They are stressful, they are scary for you, for the person being stopped, for other people who are involved. And the best thing that you can do is remain calm and try to keep other people calm. Take your deep breaths and do everything you can to really keep the tension as low as possible and keep everyone as safe as possible. Slide, please. And I just want to wrap up by saying that, we're in a really hard place right now. But these fights are fights that we have been fighting for a long time and that we have been winning for a long time. This picture here is from 1973. People in DC dumping tea crates into the Potomac River to fight for home rule, and they won, and we will win too, and that's why you should also get involved with Free DC. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to start with a question that came in for you, Emily, and then I'll have one for Sam. So the question is, do these rights apply only with Metropolitan Police Department or any and all law enforcement officers? Let's go with that one.
These rights apply to any and all law enforcement officers. The biggest difference between between other agencies and immigration agencies is that immigration agencies can ask you for documentation of your citizenship, where other enforcement agencies cannot do that. So typically, if you are out on the street, if you are driving a vehicle, you need to have your identification on you, your driver's license. But if you are walking around, you do not need to present ID. You do need to give them your legal name and address if asked, but you do not have to give them ID or any other information.
Thank you. Very helpful. Sam, there are huge shout outs in the Q&A to you and the Free DC team. And here's the question. Are there any upcoming peaceful protests planned either in DC or on the outskirts of the city to oppose this takeover and show that we do not consent to the National Guard and federal takeover?
There are not. Right now, there is not a rally or any type of direct action planned. We just on Saturday, we just did a art build. We had over 1,000 people register. And so the energy is here. And we're finding ourselves in this rapid response moment. So I encourage people to go to freedcproject.org/events. very user friendly, and all of any actions that we are going to have is going to be there. Or follow us at Free DC Project on Instagram. And you'll also be able to see anytime there is a direct action happening.
Awesome. I should have said this at the top so that people were not like feverishly taking notes about everything you said. We are going to share the slides and the recording. Apologies. Hopefully that's good news. Okay, so there are 60 questions in the Q&A. Unfortunately, we're not going to get to all of them, but I am going to do my best to get through as many samples as possible because there's obviously some overlap. And I think I can do most of these, but I'm going to say that if you feel like you have something, either speaker has something to contribute that I didn't hit, feel free. Just shout. Okay. Why are Metro PD helping the federal agents and ICE, even if they're supposed to still be reporting to our police chief? And part of that is Chief Smith issued an order that MPD collaborate with ICE. Does this still stand? Is that a violation of DC's sanctuary law? So on Thursday, the chief released an order allowing MPD to assist federal immigration enforcement agencies by sharing information about people even when they're not in MPD custody, for example, at traffic stops or checkpoints. The order prohibits people in MPD custody from being questioned by ICE or using any MPD database to inquire about a person's immigration status. I did check with our general counsel to confirm that that order is in alignment with existing DC law, because it's limited in scope, and that our Sanctuary Values Act is still on the books and is law. We didn't have a lot of time to sort of go into greater depth with the chief on that because almost immediately after that, the Bondi order came out that tried to take full control of the police. So we are going to continue to work with MPD to ensure that everybody's rights are upheld here in the city and that our laws are followed. This is troubling for me. Any even like adjacent cooperation with ICE does not work for our community in Ward 1. So I will be doing everything I can to hold MPD accountable, and I know that you will too, and continue please working with me on this and reporting what you see. Question, what is the plan to prevent federal police from entering schools? So earlier in the year, before all this happened, the answer was they couldn't enter without a warrant. There is no firm answer right now on what they can and can't do. We don't know whether ICE immigration enforcement is allowed on school grounds without a warrant under the exception of emergency. And there's also lots of ambiguity around who may be targeted: kids, parents, teachers, staff, etc. So the OAG's previously issued guidance about immigration enforcement in the schools references the specific sections of MPD policies, Code of Conduct and arrest warrants, those two sections, that Bondi's executive order specifically is suspending. And that section is still referenced in Bondi's updated EO from after the initial court decision Friday night. So we are still awaiting guidance from the Attorney General on this front, and working feverishly with DCPS and the Deputy Mayor for education and all of our schools. So please stay tuned. Everything is happening very quickly. And I know a lot of us have kids going back to school Monday, and we want to know that all the children in the school and staff are going to be safe. So we are really pressing on this right now. Question, are there immigrants who are afraid to go out for groceries or run other errands? Is there a central place for them to request assistance and for us to volunteer to help? Great question. Thank you. The spirit of it is very Ward 1. And it's something that I'm worried about too, because it's not a hypothetical. We know even earlier this year, people stopped sending children to school because they were worried. There are a lot of groups in our community that are assisting, whether it's our mutual aid networks, Migrant Solidarity Network, PTOs. Neighbors are really coming together here, and we will continue to help facilitate that. We're going to send out some additional resources after the call, and just again having our friends here on the call tonight to talk about what everybody's rights are and how to how to use them is really important. And I hope that you'll share what you learned here tonight with your neighbors as well. Sam asked, Sam, we did ask Sam's question. Sorry, that was good. Very concerned question. I'm very concerned with federal employees and members of the National Guard not wearing identifying clothing, obscuring their faces and or refusing to identify themselves. Not only does this make it more difficult to hold them accountable for their actions, it creates a possibility of bad actors impersonating the federal government or National Guard and taking advantage of vulnerable people. What can we do to protect our neighbors from unidentified actors? 100% agree and co-sign. This is extremely distressing for all of us. We're asking residents to report any instances of abuse or power or civil liberties to the Office of the Attorney General. You can start with oag@dc.gov. In Ward 1, MPD's 3rd District, 202-673-6815, or the 4th District, which number is not in my memo right now, so we will make sure we get that out in the follow-up. And then the Mayor's Office of Constituent Services. We have 2 great mokers here in Ward 1, Stephanie and Anthony, who are probably on the call tonight, and they're always out in community. And then, of course, please keep us in the loop in the council office. The Department of Homeland Security Inspector General also has a hotline that anyone can use to report allegations of employee corruption, civil rights, and civil liberties and abuses. And we can certainly share that hotline as well. And in fact, if my computer works fast enough, I can tell you 1-800-323-8603 is that number. Question, are the checkpoints legal? I understand this is within their authority. According to the Supreme Court, law enforcement checkpoints are legal for the limited purpose of public safety enforcement, such as DUIs. However, drivers can always choose alternate routes and roads if they choose not to pass through a checkpoint. But please don't drink and drive. So the checkpoint that was on 14th Street last week was one of the road safety checkpoints that MPD has been doing for the past several years. They check for DUIs. They check for car seats. They check in generally to make sure people are driving safely and to keep our roads safe. And of course, what happened last week was the feds joined in and started making it about immigration enforcement, which is highly problematic. But the checkpoint itself, for that purpose of DUIs, is lawful and allowable in DC. So just know that. Someone just asked, will there be an intermission at 8 p.m. so we can make some noise? We are going to try to wrap up at 8 p.m. so you can make some noise. Yes, unfortunately, we can't, the webinar doesn't let you all make noise here with me on the Zoom, but okay. Question. My husband has lived in the district for 28 years in Ward 1. I've observed and participated in grassroots movements with our neighbors during the recession, the pandemic, and now with our beloved city as a military state. What are you and your office doing to support all the fantastic community work that is happening? I see the DC Peace Team, District Bridges, nonprofit outreach teams, and community members like myself protecting people of color in our neighborhood. Thank you for doing all you are. As council member, I am doing my role too, which is legislate, investigate, fund, inform, advocate, amplify resources. Some of the organizations mentioned here are ones that I've actually helped fund in our community. And of course, here we are tonight holding a town hall, sharing resources. And my staff and I are available to assist with any specific cases that you may bring up, and we are. And I am talking with constituents all day, every day, about things that are coming up and that they're seeing in the community and directing them to the right resources and the right accountability agencies. And that is the role that I play as council member. And if there's a meeting or event that you're having or that you know about that you think I should attend, please send me. I love when people do that. People don't tell me everything they're doing in the ward. If they did, I would certainly try to be at whatever you sent me. So thank you. So we're winding down. We're going to be sending out the slides, a recording of the meeting. I hope you'll sign up for the newsletter at brianneknadeau.com because we're going to be sharing a lot of information that way too. We've done 3 e-blasts this week, which is very unusual. We usually do like 1 every other week, but we're going to keep everybody informed that way and on social media. And then if you are on my website, we'll share this later, but if you're on my website, you can go to Ward 1 and Community Resources and you'll see the resources page there for folks too. Okay, wait, I have a couple more minutes. Can we freely post signs on sidewalks, chalk on the sidewalk, etc., even though federal agents tore down the sign in Lamont Plaza? Yes, First Amendment rights. Those are yours still. Residents should resist in whatever way you can. And those are all allowable ways to do it. And I hope you will, and I hope you will keep doing it. So there are still almost 250 of you on this call. We got to almost 300 tonight. I just want to say thank you for taking your time out on what is probably a busy week, everyone getting ready to go back to school. I want to thank both of our speakers. I want to thank our interpreters and the whole team who put this together in my office quickly to try to make sure that we could stay abreast of everything. We will keep in touch. We are in this together. I am with you, and I appreciate those of you who have let me know that you're with me too. It takes all of us to get through this. So thank you, everybody, and we will follow up with all of these details. Good night.